Hey there guys, it's Nolan and Jason here with Plumbing Webmasters.
Howdy.
We're going to talk about plumber marketing and user intent. And before anybody, this is a good one. So it doesn't sound like it, but
It sounds very dry.
It sounds dry, but it's one of the best ones that if you can understand this, right?
Right. It's extremely important.
It's extremely important. I've gotten, it's not even getting philosophical about this stuff, but this is real stuff that exists. And on some level, from just being a businessman, and I started out contracting business, this sucks to have to know this, right?
Yeah.
It's bullshit. Why the hell do I have to worry about
this weird technical shit that barely existed, didn't exist?
The concept
30 years ago
of user intent and all the stuff we're going to talk about. But if you focused your thought on your brand and your marketing based upon the user intent goggles on,
right,
then everything would fall into place better, right?
Yeah.
So I had a potential client. Well, just had one. That one, tell you about that on that call.
Okay,
It
go
made me
ahead.
mad. Name of the company, it was the worst. It was the worst name. Exteriors, at least, it's like, okay, it was a name that didn't have to do with the name of the company. So the name was General Contractors on this one. Horrible. So somebody looks for a plumber, they look for a plumber. They look for a roofer, they look for a roofer. They look for HVAC, the word needs to have, we all know HVAC might have air or HVAC in it, or air conditioning, or heat.
Yeah, or even furnace, or, all those things.
All those things equal HVAC. So if somebody's looking for a plumber, they sure as hell aren't looking for a general contractor.
Right. So this was a plumber who had general contractor as their name, or in their name?
That was a roofer that had general contractor as their name. Now, I have HVAC will have the word mechanical, and that's a respectable name for the HVAC guy, but we don't know what the hell it means.
Yeah.
We being the general
The
public.
first time I ever saw that working for you, I'm like, why is it called mechanical?
What does that
and you
mean?
were like, well, I have no idea.
So a plumber,
but a ton of them have that.
Usually doesn't have that as a problem. The plumber usually has the word plumbing in the name.
Yeah.
Almost always. So from a user intent standpoint, almost all plumbers get a check mark on the word plumbing. If there's a different category, there's all kinds of screwed up names.
Yeah.
Now, the issue with this, though, and the word user intent doesn't really totally focus down to these people on it, because it ends up having to do with the brand, the name of the company, and all that stuff. I would like for you to describe, and we can talk about pins and like captions, but can you describe the entities?
The entity thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Entities are, these days, we still use the phrase like keywords when we're talking about SEO. But internally, that's not how Google talks about it, unless you're talking about paid ads, but that's different ballpark. And they actually try to get us to talk about it more like entities too, because an entity is, in this case, plumbing.
A category.
Yeah, is a category or a concept, and plumbing is an entity. And then anything connected to plumbing is an entity. Plumber is an entity, a slightly different one, because plumbing is the activity of doing plumbing, and plumber is the guy who does it. But they're connected.
Right.
And then you go from there, and everything that surrounds plumbing, pipe work, clogs, toilet repair, everything you think that a plumber
yard
does,
line leaks, sewer,
is itself an entity that connects to the more general entity. It's a more specific thing.
Right.
And it's this weird
It's
web
important,
of
though, that
interconnection.
all the things connect.
Yeah.
So one thing, there's one thing that's really big on plumbing that doesn't connect, that doesn't go through the entity process, that Google doesn't consider part of a plumber, and that is a rooter.
Yeah. Oddly, when you were saying most plumbers have plumber in the name, I was thinking,
A rooter.
except the ones who do rooter, and that's actually surprisingly a problem.
It's a problem because Google considers rooter synonymous with clogs and rooter synonymous with drain clean, like only.
Right.
So they literally kind of penalize because of the entity stuff he's talking about. So all the world of plumbing, from whole house repiping trenchless to leaks and slab leaks and toilets and garbage disposals. And we're having a plumber out today. We have a clog every once in a while, 3-inch cast iron pipes, and it's every once in a while. But that all can be part of the same. And a plumber can do clogs
Right.
and drain clean, but a rooter can't do general plumbing.
Yeah, if you
It's
envision it like every entity is a circle, and depending on the strength and importance of the entity, the circle is larger or smaller,
Yeah.
and there's these little lines connecting them. If you've got clogs and drains here, plumber is here and connected strongly, router's over here and is a less important entity and is connected strongly to drains and clogs, but not to all the other stuff that plumber is connected to.
It can work.
Or only very weakly to.
It sounds confusing, but basically, if all these things interrelate with proper content in the website and then get supported properly, it strengthens the whole brand that strengthens the general category of the entity.
Right.
So all the little keywords being entities in there, and as they strengthen up, they go, this is a stronger brand for this. So that when somebody's searching on Google and they're looking for a slab leak repair, and we can talk about that too, because that can be a category or its own entity.
Yeah, that's a large entity in its own right.
But if that was within a plumber's website and everything else is strengthened, it makes it more likely that all things would show up.
Right.
The entity, which is the brand, is stronger in the eyes of Google to deliver to the user.
Yeah, that's one thing I didn't get around to is the name of your business is an entity in itself.
Yeah.
So you've got plumbing, you've got plumber and all that stuff connected to. Well, you've also got your plumbing service incorporated, right? And that's an entity. And you want your SEO to connect your entity to the plumbing or plumber and the both actually.
Right.
You want it to be connected to those entities so that when someone searches in your area, Google knows, well, this person's looking for plumbing and this brand entity is that
Does all this stuff.
And through all the content on the site that we just looked at, it does all this other stuff that connects to that.
And they're clearly superior to show.
Right.
And you can get off in this stuff into the weeds, and you can get specific and do only water heater repair.
Right.
Or only slab leaks, or only trenchless. I've got guys that do only outdoor major sewer water line work, right? Like yard line.
Yeah, we have a plumber that will not
trenchless.
go inside your house.
He'll go in to look at the clog location.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But
he won't do any work within the walls of the house.
The walls of the house. But he makes huge money when he does one. But and we went through that, so I can't remember that guy's site, but it's weird.
It was recent.
It was recent, and we only wrote content for outdoor yard work. And so when people start looking at that category and looking at stuff, Google's going to give that entity credibility and favoritism for those categories. So when I talk
that specialization strengthens his connections, his links
through that more narrow category or entity.
Right.
Now, this begs the question. A lot of plumbers do everything, and that's okay. And a plumber can get away with it, like I was just saying, more than another category. Definitely more than a roofer who's trying to do all exterior stuff, but the client just wants a roofer. When somebody's looking for water heater repair, though, or a slab leak or certain things, that entity can be stronger than that plumber can beat a slab leak specialist because the entity's so strong.
Right.
In this category, because the client still really just wants a plumber, but they're looking for slab leak, and the user intent still syncs up.
Right.
It's when the user intent goes completely off that they lose brand and they lose everything else. And I was just actually talking to another guy today, and I was looking at his website, and it was quite large, and he had a lot of stuff on there. So he had all sorts of pages about plumbing. But it was old. It was from 2007. It looks like maybe it hadn't been worked on since 2007. So, and I told him, I forget his name, but I told the guy, I was like, 12 years ago, this would have been a great site. In fact, 12 years ago, this site might have dominated, but things change all the time.
Right.
And this user intent is one of the primary changes we're talking about. So if you'd stuck this site up, and I said, you have shallow, very general shallow content. It wasn't technical at all. It didn't, and we can talk about data pins just for a second, but it wasn't technical at all. Didn't have anything going on with it, and it had fallen flat. And he knew he wasn't getting business anymore.
Right.
So 12 years ago, he put up this site, he would have dominated. But you don't tell them anything you do. You never update any of this stuff. The content's shallow. You have 4 reviews. He'd done quite a bit of work, but he had 4 reviews. That was it. And there was no signaling going on. So even though all the words were there, it had the entity and everything had fallen.
It was just words.
It had fallen completely flat. And I was talking about this, so I'm going to use this an example, and I'll use Renai. I don't know if I want to use that one. I'm going to use HVAC for it because it's just, the plumbers have a little bit less of it, but this is going to make sense.
Okay.
So a guy's an HVAC dealer or an HVAC company, and he's installing a Linux air handler, Linux M30 Wi-Fi thermostat. We've talked about this one before. And when he starts talking about Linux on the AC replacement page, and he tags it and says, I was here, here's photos of the job, and here's what I did, which was a Linux this and a Linux that. If the guy goes and puts up a Linux page one time, and I check this all the time right now. I just showed this to somebody, by the way, because we talked about it on a podcast yesterday.
Right.
And you type in Linux HVAC repair in a city, Linux will show up first, or whatever company. I can't remember who we were looking at the other day, but they'll show up first. Renai will show up first, or whatever brand will show up first, the national brand. But the user intent was to look for repair. And Google knows that the user intent is localized to repair or replacement.
Right.
They know it's not supply or bulk or, warehouse supply.
General information or whatever.
They're aware that that was the user intent. However, somebody talking about something one time, and I'm relating this to the old crappy website that the guy had.
Right.
So the fact that you put up a page about the service doesn't mean that you'll show up for anything, because there's been so little work on the entity and all the interlacing parts that Google deems it not good enough to show up high in ranking.
Right.
So once this guy had talked about Linux over and over again, and once any of our clients talk about any brand over and over again, the national.com for Linux gets replaced with our local guy.
Right.
Because the user intent is that, and now that Google feels trustworthy with you, that you have enough going on that you can help with that specific branded repair, you then have that user intent and trust of all the entity crud going on. He does a way better job explaining it to me, but all this stuff interlaces, and the algorithm is smart enough to figure it out.
Yeah, and that, by the way, is we have de-emphasized blogging for some time.
We have.
And what he's talking about is exactly why traditional type of blogging doesn't work anymore, because your blogger will, you're servicing Linux HVAC now.
Well, it's plumber, or how about Renai tankless water heaters?
Okay, Renai tankless water heaters. You install and service those now. So you want to talk about that. And a blogger comes on and says, what is a tankless water heater? Or,
right.
3
reasons to switch to tankless water heaters.
3 reasons why Renai is the best water heater brand, or something like that. None of that. And although that does put words on your site, and Google will see them and they'll track those keywords, nothing about that content links you to the entity of tankless water heater or Renai, or at least it's not a strong link to that entity.
Right.
It's very weak, and it doesn't speak to user intent, because blogs are usually written as informational cruft. That they don't have an intent to them. It's just trying to get words on a page to get an X amount of keyword density or whatever. And if I could take 1 second to, because we didn't actually define user intent.
Okay.
User intent is when Google looks at everybody's activity online on, using Google, obviously. Well, actually everybody's, but we're talking about using search specifically. And when people put in certain types of search terms, they then look at what those people click on and what those people want. And from this, they build a big database and run it through the algorithm. and they decide that if someone puts in a certain kind of search term, that they are trying to get a service or a product or information or whatever it is. An example of this that we saw at a conference once was if you put in glassware into Google, Google's first assumption will be that you are looking to buy some glasses for your kitchen. And so the top things they'll show is places to buy those.
Right.
But let's just say you are interested in antique glassware and you want to go to a museum. Well, then you got to get specific and say, I'm looking for the Museum of Glassware. And then they'll say, oh, okay, your user intent is different.
Right.
But every search that goes in, they try to determine user intent.
What's the user intent? And it's not just that, it's who can help them with this user intent.
Right, right. Yeah.
Who is credible? And so if a client knew how important this was, they would, for one thing, make their website about what services they truly offer and want to offer,
Right.
especially if they're categorized. So if they don't really want to do small repairs, you might leave the stuff off. You might keep it in a plumber because they'll pick up repeat items. But if the plumber really wants to do water heaters or really wants to do this, you say, now if they're doing everything, that's fine. We have plenty of plumbers that have like dozens of pages on services. But those pages of services need to be tended to so that when Google tries to determine user intent, they can combine it with the interlacing of the entity's strength. And if you leave a page of content up, like the guy that had the 14-year-old website, 15-year-old website, that content on that website is largely ineffective.
Right.
When you use data pins, and I'm not trying to sell data pins, go use anything that'll do this, but when you use something that'll say, hey, I was at this job, and here's a geo-coordinate of where I was, here's pictures of the job, and by the way, we just replaced a Rinnai or Navian tankless water heater. And you tag the tankless water heater page, you get a geo-coordinate validation that somebody was there, you get unique content in the form of photos and unique content in the form of a caption. The captions are detailed and more technical. They add to the primary keywords of the category and also expand long tails and validity of the service and expertise of the service.
I tell clients when I talk to them about data pins that the pins that they create
Right.
answer the two most important questions for local SEO, which is what you do and where you do it.
Right.
And within those, it sounds simple, I'm a plumber and I'm in this city, is the most basic form of that question, but then you start getting into specifics and then it gets into what you were talking about. It's like all the long tail keywords, very specific brands or specific sub-services.
So if Google comes back and says, hey, we've got a 3-page site over here never worked on, a 30-page site over here, and hundreds of other in between, a 10-page site where a guy does hundreds of Google business profile reviews and all this stuff around, but one guy's got 30-page site, worked on regularly, 48 reviews. He's newer, but he's been working for months doing this. That guy's going to start showing up, especially on long tail keyword terms,
Right.
because no one else has any authority on it. And when you have a tankless page, just as this is just one example of a page on your website, but they're trying to figure out your entity, trying to figure out if it matches user intent, trying to figure out if it's credible to do so, and if so, how high to put it. And your tankless water heater page is the only one that has had 40 pins with pictures of job and captions about what you did that spread out over a 6-month period. Why would they show another page? And ultimately, that old site I was looking at, that's why his pages quit getting showed. Because this is an older guy too, by the way.
Yeah.
He quit doing everything. They don't even know he's in business, really, at
Yeah.
that point. All they know is that website page is live. They don't know anything else.
And
he never even gets a review.
Yeah, and the reason, and because when someone, back to user intent, when someone searches for service for, Rinnai tankless water heater, Google assumes they want someone who performs a service. And if your page is just information about those water heaters, well, that's not what they think the person wants. And they already know everything there is to know about Rinnai water heaters. And if they think you're looking for just information, the best source would be
corporate,
the manufacturer.
Yeah.
So there's no way they're going to show that local site unless you've established that you work on those.
Yep.
And something like DataPins establishes that.
I'd like to say too, when somebody, let's discuss LSI real quick.
Okay.
Latent semantic indexing. Most of this stuff is more confusing than it really needs to be to me, but it's basically Google's version of a synonym or something, right?
Yeah.
Except that a synonym is usually like words that are related to the word good, but LSI, latent semantic indexing, is words that are related to a category.
Right.
So which is different, so a plumber is related to slab leaks equally as to a hose bib, equally to front yard line leak and clogs and et cetera. So
Right.
that latent semantic indexing, they know what your category is. A plumber mistake that will be made sometimes, and I've seen these do okay, and it's a fairly related category, but it begins to water it down is when the plumber tries to go into HVAC or the HVAC tries to go into plumbing.
Yeah, we have a few that do that.
And they get away with it a lot better than a roofer trying to go into remodeling.
Yeah.
Because at least plumbing and HVAC has some LSI similarities, especially depending on what part of the country you're in. They do water heaters, and HVAC will do a water heater, plumber, stuff like that. But anyway, so understanding this stuff is important for you to understand how the algorithm works so that you know how to make your marketing work. And if you understand this, you wouldn't fight against a web company that asks you to do something like use $1 million software that we developed to help you make this happen.
Yeah. If you understand what we're talking about, the captions and descriptions you put into DataPins will be far more effective.
Yeah, it's not just a caption. It's not just a pen. It is activating all of this stuff to occur.
Right. I'll occasionally have a client call and say, I don't know if this is performing for me, and I'll look at the pins they've done. And we train them on this, but they don't always get it the first time. Yeah. And I'll look, and it's like, I'll see the words toilet repair, nothing else, repeated over and over and over. And I'm like, this has no context. If you walked up to a person on the street, looked them in the eye and said, toilet repair, and walked away, they would not know what the hell they would not know you were a plumber. They would not know anything about you.
Yeah, algorithm. I mean, they could have said, repaired Kohler 1.6 gallon low flow toilet or something, or I don't know. They could have said anything about it, or replaced wax seal on toilet, or replaced whatever it was. They could have gone through.
Customer had a leaky toilet. We discovered that it was the wax seal.
There you go.
Did a full replacement.
Right.
Customer was very happy.
Right.
If you want to throw that in there, kind of thing. And that actually provides context to the word toilet repair.
So context to the word toilet repair and expands the other keywords. Will somebody type in a wax seal replacement toilet? Not very often, but if they do, you may be the only person who ever spoke about it locally.
Exactly.
Yeah, so then you pick up another keyword term, and you supported your primary keyword term. And doing toilet repair, basically the algorithm's like, I'm glad you're doing some pens, but this is some pretty crappy content you're putting up.
No pun.
Yeah. So, so they'll go look at it and kind of give credit where credit is due.
Right.
Which they always kind of do, right?
And the point about the long tail keywords, having like a huge pile of semi-obscure long tail keywords can do more for you than a reasonably good placement on the general keyword.
Oh,
yeah. If you can be number one for plumber, you want that, of course. But number one for plumber is going to be hotly contested. You're not going to go from 0 to or you're not going to go from page 20 to first spot, in a month.
So this is imperative for anybody that's new. So anybody that's been around, this is a way to speed back up. I told this guy too, I said, the good news is you're the old horse on the track. Your horse is just going slow. But the way that Google works is your horse is respected, has tenure. So when you meet with us, you'll be turbocharged and be running much faster immediately. So an old site gets injected with new design code content, starts getting pins and all the other stuff that we do, and it just tends to take off pretty quickly. We have a pretty fast response and happy client. A new horse on the track is in rough shape. Doesn't have tenure, doesn't have trust, doesn't have reviews, doesn't have anything.
It could be running 100 miles an hour, but it's 1,000 laps behind.
Right. So it's a really good analogy.
On what they're fighting against.
So they desperately need regular activity through pins and long tail keyword terms. So long tail keyword terms will sustain a brand new plumber in the first 6 months instead of him just starving out entirely, especially depending on the size of the market.
Yeah.
So if that plumber's in like Dallas, Fort Worth, where we live, I mean, my God, you better have some stuff going.
We can help you with it. We can get you there, but you're going to have to fight for it.
We still have guys that come up and do it. I mean, we've got a few fairly new clients. We have a new client in this one. Mulberg's not that new anymore, but he's growing in this market in town.
He was new when he came to us.
He was new when he came to us.
And he's doing good now.
I think he's been with us for several years now.
Yeah.
But he came and made it happen and started. He actually he used his pins and had called and wanted to do paid. I think I've told this story before once. He called and wanted to do paid advertising, and I said, why don't you just do more pins for now and call me back in 6 months. And I never heard from him again. And I never heard from him for buying leads again. And so he gets a lot more pins now and optimizes for a lot of stuff. And it appears as though he's adding trucks here and there and doing stuff.
Nice.
Anyway, a lot of what we're talking about is important for you, whether you're new or old, but imperative if you're new.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like imperative. A lot of our older clients rest on their laurels of tenure and trust with Google. They're already up in ranking.
Yeah.
And they'll stubbornly...
like the guy you were talking to. He's probably been doing fine for a while because he was coasting on the earlier effort, but eventually it will catch up to you.
He's probably been having probably started several years ago.
Yeah.
And then now he just looks up and he's like, I had a horrible year last year. And
so it's like the last 2 years have not been good. What the hell happened?
Right.
It's like I thought it was COVID or something, but everybody around me is busy. What gives?
Yeah. It's weird how user intent, which is what someone's searching for, which is Google trying to translate best, goes into work that a client has to do and how all these things interlace.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating. But if someone tries to think about it a little bit, even if you don't understand the whole category topic, because to me still sometimes this is like, it's ridiculous to have to think about it in this manner. It's only been recently that I started looking at it and I think about stuff like from a branded perspective. And really I used to think about stuff from content perspective and design and code base perspective, which is still all important, but that was my primary perspective. I might think about links and reviews.
Right.
So those are the first things that everybody thinks about. And then they call up and say, hey, can I get y'all to write me content? I'm looking for someone to do my blogging. Do y'all do links? And it's like, all right. And then so you're looking at these really outdated thought processes that are just basic fundamentals at this point.
Yeah.
That are thrown into everything. But the primary thought now is user intent, branding, reputation, reviews, and then everything else is just high-end background noise.
Yeah.
Design, code, content, speed, URL, parent-child format, and citations. All that's just like, we do all that stuff.
We do that. Everybody does that because everybody
stuff.
has to do that.
Everybody has to do that stuff.
Yeah.
This is the new stuff.
Yeah. You can't build a house until you put the foundation down, and all of that stuff is the foundation now.
And then now part of it, we built software. We have data pins. And it's like, okay, data pins is user intent, is branding, is content at a better rate, is normal signal, newer signaling, is schema wrapped geocoordinates. It's all of that stuff is what pushes it.
Yeah.
Everything else just has to be done. So, yeah. Anyway, should we wrap this up? We've been saying we don't dismount.
We're bad on the dismount.
So what have we learned here today? All right, so to wrap up, user intent is a potentially frustrating topic, but a slightly better way to think about the marketing so that the client on our end or the plumber thinks about their end.
Right.
It's like,
Thinks about their brand entity and how it relates to the entities that comprise the services they offer.
and with that knowledge, you'd be less frustrated to have your guys, a couple of guys doing data pins, or somebody in the office using data pins,
Right.
and spending some of your energy on it because of the wide effect it'll have on how well you show up in search rankings and how much stinking money you'll make off of it.
Right. There is paying someone in your office to do data pins. You will get a massive return on investment for that effort.
Yeah, and the owner is going to have to give a little bit of grief on management of this. Let's say an hour a month worth.
Yeah.
You know, once it's up and going, but it's highly justified.
Yeah. We see a lot of clients that they start doing pins and we'll watch over time and it'll fall off and then they'll stop. And I'll call them and say, you know, hey, you're not doing your pins anymore. What gives? Well, I can't get my guys to do them. And it's like, are you the owner of the company? I don't generally say it quite that bluntly.
Well,
and
it can or won't. It's hard to, it's
Yeah.
tough to tell a guy to do something when you're having trouble hiring people in this market and they're bitching about it. Now, you can, if they use a software service that already puts photos in a database, they can grab the photos, they have the address, they can look up the geo coordinates, and there's a desktop version.
Right.
As long as the person in the office doesn't do a crappy entry like toilet repair, as long as they take brand parts.
As long as they don't do copied pictures, which we've run into before.
Yeah,
too.
stealing
Grabbing photos
Google
off Google
images
and using the same 10 images over and over. When you have, be wary of that. If you hire kind of a low-level clerkish person to just sit there and do
how
that.
dare you, Jason? How dare you insult human beings that work in plumbing offices? It's not like
You know what I mean.
Everybody's got low-level clerkish people from time to time.
But you have to watch them because we had a client that he assigned it to somebody in the office. He did 350 pins.
Stole every image.
And I went and looked,
Yeah.
and there were like 5 or 6 different captions copied and pasted over and over. There were about 10 images used over and over. I said, okay, you're going to hate me for saying this, but we have to delete all this because this is actually such bad content, you might be getting a penalty. So we're deleting all this, and you have to start over.
Getty Images will have an attorney call you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some copy. I mean, it's not that hard to do them, but
Yeah.
it's good stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's just like there are things in business. And this is a good ending on this stuff too to go over this. There are things in business that I wish to hell I didn't have to do.
Yeah.
All the time, and
Yeah.
it's not to say I told you so or anything. It's like, shit, I have to go manage that crap.
Yeah.
And then I think in my, I'm 49, so
I have to go behind and make sure everybody's doing their job properly.
when I was in my 20s, I gladly did all of it, and I boasted about cleaning the toilet. I'll clean a toilet. I don't want to, but there's certain things I would go energy level, do all of it, all sales, all work, everything, work everybody under the table. In my 30s, I thought, I'll delegate and then forget about it, and in my 40s, still a lot of these thoughts, right? Early 40s. And so when you look at that stuff, I mean, and those things fall completely apart. This marketing stuff is something that can't ever be turned loose
It
up.
cannot be completely delegated to another person.
The guy that asked Jason, can I quit? No, you can't ever quit marketing, ever.
Yeah.
It's like it's never going to stop, no matter how old you are, no matter what you do.
No
your
matter how
marketing-
long you run the business.
Never going to stop.
Yeah.
And once you think like that, I have people still ask me all the time, well, Nolan, once y'all design the website and write the content, what the hell do you do? And they don't really say that at the end, but that's what they
Actually,
mean.
sometimes they say exactly that to
What
me.
they
but-
base, what do you do then? I was like, well, I don't know. I just crap out $100,000 a month to pay a bunch of people. They sit at home and eat grapes and play World of Warcraft, and then we hit the enter key in your credit card once a month.
You actually want to say that sometimes.
That's what
just to
they
hear the
think,
reaction.
though. That's what people think. But the truth of the matter
Yeah.
is, the marketing never stops. This stuff doesn't end. So my advice to you is to embrace your marketing wholeheartedly. try to understand what user intent a little bit and what a brand means. Try to understand what Google is going to do and interpret that, and understand that your moves on your end are vital, and interpret that entire brand back through this digital bullshit, automated AI algorithm.
Yeah.
And
that we're all at the mercy
that
of.
we're at the mercy of, that grows more all the time, and you are feeding it information.
Right.
And that in turn determines the user intent through your nurturing of your brand and your signaling of your brand. And the great thing about it is, you want to get cynical about all this, is that you can tell them whatever the hell you want.
If you give them information in their preferred format, they do not, in most cases, want to verify it. They don't want to take the time. The only thing they verify is addresses.
Fact checked.
Yeah, they verify addresses for Google business profiles.
Right.
And they do that aggressively.
They do.
They do that far too aggressively.
They do.
But everything else, they're like, oh, you're the world's foremost expert in laser eye removal, whatever.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, so the irony, the crappiness of all this can be turned around, and you realizing that, and you spinning your own narrative to get as much benefit off of that as you can.
Right.
So if I had to leave you with something, that's the takeaway. Get your user intent, slam your narrative out there, your brand, get it picked back up, understand that it's voracious and it's gobbling it up, and then get put up as many damn times as you can.
Right.
And that's the, I guess that's the way to get retribution on the whole
There you go.
ball of crap.
Boom.
Hey, how's that? That's not a bad dismount.
That's a good dismount.
Stuck that dismount. All right. We'll see you. Bye, guys.
See ya.